Hey guys, so welcome back. So in this video, we are actually going to be setting up our starter web development environment, and for which we need to install a proper code editor. And when it comes to code editors, I always recommend Visual Studio Code. Alright, so go ahead onto your browser and type Visual Studio Code and go ahead to the Visual Studio Code official website. So once you're on the homepage, it's actually going to detect on which system you are. So for me, it's actually detected that I'm on Windows, so it's recommending that download for Windows. But obviously, if you want to download it for some other OSs, that is Mac OS and Linux operating system, so you can also go ahead and do that. But for me, I'll just download it for Windows. Alright, so once the setup for the Visual Studio Code actually gets downloaded, you can actually go ahead and click that. That would execute the exe and you would get started with your setup. And this is nothing different than any other setup that you have handled before. So you can actually go ahead and accept the agreement and click on next. Now, here I want you to keep each and everything clicked because we want this open with code for both file and directory, and also we want to register it as an editor for any files that are supported by it, and also we want to add it to our path. And you may and may not choose to add it on your desktop. I mean, that's up to you. Then you can go ahead and click next, and then you can go ahead and click install. I won't be hitting install because I already have Visual Studio installed on my system. So you guys can pause the video here, go ahead and install Visual Studio Code. Alright, so once you have installed Visual Studio Code, go ahead and create a new folder. Alright, so I have created a new folder named Fullstack Web Dev. And here I'll be right clicking inside the folder, and here you can see we can see open with code. So this is what the setting was inside the setup, where it wanted that open with code setting in the file and directory. Alright, so you can actually open any file or any directory directly by right clicking and opening it with code. Alright, so you can either go ahead and click open with code to open this directly inside your Visual Studio Code, or there is another cool way. Alright, so go ahead and open a terminal inside this folder and then write code space dot and hit enter. And this will actually open up Visual Studio Code inside that directory. So that's a little cool trick to open up code when you want to flex in front of your friends. Alright. So yeah, so once code opens up, so it's going to look something like this. Alright, not exactly like this because mine has a lot of extensions running. Alright, and yours is freshly installed. So don't get any sidetracked here. Alright, so once you open up, you are actually going to see the welcome screen. Alright, and it's actually going to show you that if you want to start a new project, open up a new file, open up a folder, and it's also going to show you some recent projects. For me, it's going to show up some recent projects. And if you are new to code, you might not have recent projects here. Alright. And there is a checkbox down below if you want to see this welcome page every time you open up code. So I personally don't want to see it every time I open up code. So I'm just going to click uncheck this box and close the window. Alright, so I don't want to see the welcome page. So this is what a directory would look like if you open up code and you have 0 files in it. So now if you look onto the left, you would actually see the file explorer, alright, in which you can see that your Fullstack Web Dev folder is actually open. And once you hover onto this, you can actually see that you can create a new file, a new folder, you can refresh it, and you can collapse the folder in the explorer. Alright, so for us, we actually want to create a new file in this directory. Alright, so go ahead and click onto the new file icon, and this would create a new file. And you can write a new name for your file over here. Alright, for us, we actually want to create a new HTML file, in which we are actually going to write a skeletal HTML for our first website. So I have named the file as CodeCove.html. Alright, so once you have named yours, you can actually press enter, and that would actually name the file and also open it in the editor. So now in the same way, let's go ahead and create a CSS and JS file. Alright, so now we have 3 files in our directory, which is CodeCove.html, .css and .js. Alright, so one's HTML, the other one's CSS, and the other one's JS. So one would contain the skeleton, the other one would contain the beauty, and the third one would contain the brain. So as we are just starting to learn web development, so I would just close down the CSS and JS files for now, and let's just focus on the HTML. That is just the skeleton for the actual website. So now you guys must be thinking that why are we using Visual Studio Code? I mean, we could have just created an HTML file and simply edited it in the notepad, right? Alright, so what's the difference? So what does Visual Studio Code bring onto the table? Well, let me show you one thing, alright. So I'll just hit exclamation here and hit tab. That's an HTML boilerplate in just 1 second. Now just imagine how much time it would have taken you to edit that inside of Notepad. So this is what Visual Studio Code brings onto the table. Alright, it would give you intelligence, it would give you recommendations, what you need to write, what is the error on some specific line, everything. Alright, because on the notepad you would have to find each and every line where you created an error, where you forgot a bracket, where you didn't put a semicolon and everything. In Visual Studio Code, everything would be automatically detected and shown to you then and there. Alright, so that you don't have any productivity loss once you are creating a high-end application. So now you can go ahead and edit the title tag. For me, I have just written CodeCove. For you, you can write your name or anything. Alright. And right now, I won't be going into any details of what each of these tags are. That's for the next video. For this video, we are just going to set up the web development environment. Alright, and we are almost halfway there. So yeah, I mean, if you are looking at Visual Studio Code for the first time in your entire life, so yeah, it might look a little bit more intimidating than it actually is. So you might be a little bit confused at what all these buttons do on the left hand side and what everything is on my screen. Alright, so let me just walk you through it. Alright, so the first icon right here is actually your file explorer. Alright, so this would show you all the files that are currently open. So this is actually open in editor. So I have only one file open in editor, so this would only show the one file codecove.html. Now if you look down below, this would actually show you the directory in which your Visual Studio is actually open, and it would show you each and every file that's currently existing in that folder. Alright, so for me there are actually 3 files in this folder and I can see all 3 of them. If I want to open one, I can actually click on it and see what the content of that specific file is. The next one is pretty straightforward. So this is the search, in which you can search for any keyword, any file in the whole directory where your Visual Studio is currently open. Alright, so I can actually search for any file inside my Fullstack web development folder. So you want to find where you had written some specific code for a specific function. So you can actually go ahead and search that if you have forgotten in which file you had actually written it initially. And if you want to replace something in multiple files, you can also go ahead and do that too. So you can go ahead and search a certain keyword that you want to replace in all the files. And then you can write the word that you want to replace it in the replace input tag and hit replace all. And all this stuff you would only do when you are working with a lot of files. So currently we are just beginning to start our web development journey, so we won't even be using this. Alright. And for starters, you also won't be having all of these buttons. I think you guys only have Explorer, Search, Git, and yeah, you guys also have Run and Debug, and you guys have extensions. Alright. So all the other buttons that I have are actually extensions that I have pre-installed in my Visual Studio Code. Alright. And don't worry, you guys will get there. But for now, some people might also not know about Git. And I also don't want you to worry about it. Alright, so just leave it how it is. And also don't worry about Run and Debug. We are not going to be using that. And extensions, yes. So extensions are very important. So this is something specific that Visual Studio Code actually provides. So with these extensions, you can actually add some more functionality to your code editor itself. Alright. So let's say you want to learn a new language. You can install the extension for that specific language, and then it would provide you suggestions and intelligence for that specific language. Or if you want to add some test environments, alright, or some specific framework extension, alright, so you can go ahead and do that. Install that and it would increase your productivity by 10 times. So if you are working with Visual Studio Code for the first time, you actually won't be having any extensions installed in the install tab. Alright, for me it is actually showing 55 extensions. You might have less, you might have more. Alright, so I would just want you to close the install tab and the recommendation tab itself. So what we want to do now is actually search for an extension which is called live server. So go ahead, write live server in the search tab and hit enter, and make sure you are actually connected to the internet. Alright, because otherwise you won't be shown any extensions. So once you hit enter, you would be actually shown multiple extensions by the same name, or some extensions that actually perform the same task. Alright, so what I want you to do is actually go ahead and click onto the live server, which is actually created by Ritvik Day. So as you guys can see, this extension actually has 34 million downloads. Alright, so you guys can actually see how frequently this extension is actually used worldwide. So I actually have already installed it in my Visual Studio Code, but for you it would be actually showing install here. So you guys can go ahead and click install and wait for it to get installed in your Visual Studio Code. And once it gets installed, you would actually be shown the exact same thing that I'm currently seeing on my screen. Alright, so it would show you the install button and the disable button. Alright, but we obviously don't want to hit disable. We obviously want it to be activated. Alright, so once you have your live server installed, you would actually see a go live button on the bottom right of your Visual Studio Code. And if you guys are not seeing that go live button, I want you guys to actually relaunch your Visual Studio Code and hopefully it would show up. So now you guys can either go ahead and hit that go live button, or you could actually come inside your HTML, hit right click And here in the options, you would actually find open with live server. All right. So you can also open up your live server like this, but I would just go ahead and click go live, and this would actually open up the live server with this HTML onto my local host. Alright, so once your live server actually starts, it's actually going to open up your HTML in your local host. Alright, and in the bottom right, you are actually going to be provided a port in which your Visual Studio Code has started the live server. Alright, so for me, the port was 5500. For you, it might be different or it might be same. So if you guys are not automatically taken to your local host, you guys can actually go ahead and open up your browser and hit your local host like this. That is 127.0.0.1:5500/codecove.html or the HTML that you created. Alright. And as you can see on the top left, it's actually showing my title CodeCove, which I actually edited in the title tab inside my HTML. And yeah, when it comes to browsers, I would recommend you to use Chrome for the entire web development course, because that's what I'll be using and that's what I always recommend for web development. Alright, because it's stable, it provides a nice development environment, and it also has a very well supported developer console. So I would advise all you guys to continue your web development journey on Google Chrome. Alright, so now that we have our live server running, now let me show you the power of the live server. So now what I'll do is actually go ahead and edit some stuff in my HTML. Alright, so I'm actually going to write chillin at the Cove inside my body. Alright, and hit save. Now what this will do is when I hit save, it would automatically show the changes on the live server. Alright, so we won't need to reload the page once we have changed something on the HTML. Alright, so let's go back to the live server and we won't be needed to hit reload, and it would just show you the changes instantly. And yeah, as you can see, just like that, without any reload, changes were reflected onto a live server. Alright, so this is the actual power of the live server. And this is why everyone recommends to install a live server when you start web development, because it saves you a lot of time. Alright, you don't want to hit reload every time you make a change in a certain file. You want it to get reflected instantly once you make a change. Alright, because you don't want to waste any time to hit reloads. Alright, so once you are done tinkering with your HTML, you can actually go ahead to the bottom right where it actually shows the port. So for me, it's port 5500. You can go ahead and click that, and this would actually stop the live server for you. So now that we are completely set up with VS Code and have installed the live server and can actually see the HTML reflected onto the local host, so we are now completely ready to start learning how to create a skeleton for an actual website. Alright. So in the next video, we'll actually be going through each and every tag that you can currently see on my screen, and also some additional tags. Alright, and how to actually write HTML and how to correctly write HTML. So all that we'll do in the next one. So until then, keep chilling at the CodeCove.